With that, we'll move on to the first session of the day. The first session that we have lined up is going to be chaired by Ambassador Anil Trigunayat. So could I please request you to come onto the stage and take your place. This session of about roughly 50 minutes is about the economy, investment and trade, scripting India's growth story in Amritkaal 2023 to 2024. Over to you, sir.
We have the good evening again. May I invite the esteemed panelists? So may I now request the esteemed panelists to kindly join me. Mr. Aman Sinha, Mr. Tanmoy Chakrabarty, Mr. Swaminathan. Well, as you all know that whatever we may talk about security, we may talk about foreign policy, we may talk about anything else. At the fundamental level, the most important thing is the strong economy of any country. If we are economically strong, we can move ahead in every which direction. And you become the point of attraction for everyone else. India was a golden bird, as we know, Soni ki chidiya. And we had attracted nearly everybody from across the world to come to India. Today's India is once again a resurgent India. We started our economic reforms in 1991 under the international compulsion, essentially, of the situation that happened because of the Gulf Wars. We have had to hypothecate the goals to pay, basically honor our payments to the international community. We never defaulted on anything. We were also, this economic reforms led to the troika of globalization, privatization and liberalization, three policies, brought us to a certain level in the last 30 odd years. India's economic growth has been talked about. Sometimes it was called as Hindu rate of growth, which was said to be a slow rate of growth. We have also seen that in certain sectors, especially in the services sector, India's achievements have been tremendous. India is known as the IT power of the world. And that has given a certain identity to the country. So that is extremely important from our perspective and our point of view. But in the last 9 years, I would say, there has been a greater emphasis on economic development of the country. To take the country to a certain level. Prime Minister Modi spoke of making India a $5 trillion economy by 2025. We are reaching there despite the pandemic, despite the war. We have had to undergo economic reforms, which is an ongoing process. I remember when we were in New York, and Ambassador Kulshresht is here, I went to Boston and met Professor Jeffrey Sachs at the time. And he mentioned to me that India is very slow. It will hardly make it. Last week in the VIF, we had Professor Jeffrey Sachs talk, and he told me, and I told him one word. I said, India is not up for sale. We will do our reforms as per our requirements, as per our socio-economic objectives. And that was an extremely important thing which I conveyed to Delhi also about this. And that was the time when India was opening up. All major countries in the world And we were in New York, which was USA, which was the hub of it, a lot. A large number of financial companies came to India. The large number of IT companies were looking at India in a great way. Many infrastructure companies, some failed like the Enron, but they came to India. Technology also began to come into India, and the private domain. While we have these problems with the United States with regard to transfer of technology, but it happens. The biggest example, of course, is the information technology, but for which we were ready, and we did that. And I must say, sir, you were a Commerce Secretary at the time, and the way you supported us was an amazing, something amazing, and I always recall and recount the way you supported us. So today we are looking at India by 2047 to become a developed country. The economic growth today is said to be roughly about 7%, even if whether we go by World Bank, IMF or several other statisticians telling us which way it is going. It has become the second largest market in the world after China. Chinese economy is having its own downturn at the moment because of various reasons we all know, pandemic and the kind of Sino-US trade war that is going on. On the contrary, there is a situation where the world is preferring other countries, and there are ASEAN countries where they are looking at many countries wanting the investors back into the country. Today I was reading that many of the US companies have decided to go back to China or find some other alternative, cheaper places. The reason is because the GSP has not been renewed by the Americans themselves. So it's very often they tend to shoot in their foot very often. This is what they do. There's one thing that they have done, in my view, is weaponization of the financial instruments. In the Russia-Ukraine war, we are seeing weaponization of energy as a response of the food or the fuel by the Russians as a counter to that. Now this weaponization of financial instruments will see, or already seeing, the emergence of alternate financial structures. India today, as of last count, 18 countries have accepted payment in rupees, which is a very big deal. And that's how you are going to reduce the transaction costs between various transactions that will happen. It will make things easier. But now we have the industries who have the main idea about exactly how things are playing out. So I will not say much about the policy framework. They will tell us how whether the PLI incentive that the government has launched or expanded it, or Atmanirbhar program, how is it playing out, whether we are talking about the domestic savings rate increasing once again. Probably, till the 90s, we used to nearly finance 92% of our investments from within our resources. The highest per capita saving was India. And that went off on a trail, but today again, I think it's increased once again. We are one of the biggest, maybe it is because of our frugal nature of the Indians per se, that want to keep things for a rainy day. That comes handy in a situation like this. So India is emerging, and will emerge. Today we have already beaten the Britishers, who have tried to behave in a very obnoxious manner with regard to attack on our consulate in San Francisco, and the Britishers in London in front of the Indian High Commission. That's one way of the responding to the fact that India has bypassed them as an economy. And it is said that for purchasing power parity, we are the third largest today. We might become the real third largest by 2030, as it is said. And by 2047, India is looking at a $30 billion. Of course, there are roadblocks. Everything is not smooth or the way we wish it to be. There are others in the game. Those who are attracting more investments because of the policy frameworks, a better policy coordination, better way of executing projects. So more investments go there. So we have to compete for foreign direct investments, for portfolio investments, for technology transfer, because that's what is going to basically take us to the next level as we are looking at it, whether it is AI, robotics, or quantum technologies. We are looking at this. So how these issues are going to play out in the next next 25 years, as which we call as Amritkaal, or I don't know if we can call it as the golden period of India from now on. So I'll request Mr. Aman Sinha to please tell us something in about 10 minutes. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat ji, and my esteemed co-panelists Tanmoy ji and Swaminathan ji. So my namaskar, my greetings to all the eminent intellectuals who have congregated here for today's important gathering. I see a lot of well-known, familiar, very accomplished faces, excellencies in the gathering, and my heartiest greetings on Now Samvatsar, which is the New Year, Hindu New Year, and my heartiest greetings and best wishes to all of you on this auspicious occasion. The subject that I was assigned to speak, Ambassador Trigunayat, by Abhinav Pandya ji, I do not see him here. Maybe I'm not able to locate where he is, but wherever he is, I want to compliment him and the entire team of Usanas Foundation for organizing this remarkable program and giving us an opportunity to meet and exchange our views and ideas. So, Ambassador, the subject that I was assigned was legal economic reforms, and I believe the time is short. It's about 10-12 minutes, so we'll get going, because to summarize all the huge legal economic reforms which have taken place in last decade within 10 minutes is a challenge in itself. So, some 9 years back, India had about a complex three-tier web of regulatory compliances, which included about 1600 laws, regulatory compliances to start and run a business. There were about 1600 laws at national, state and at local level, at municipal level. Similarly, the second micro web was another compliances which were in terms of filings, etc., about 70,000 of them. They were mini compliances, so to speak, and another set of 7,000 filings. This was the position which was existing in, say, around 2014. Now, after the present government came in leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, the first real remarkable transformational legal reform which has taken place, in my opinion, is that on initiative of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, about more than 1,500 obsolete, redundant laws have been repealed, more than 40,000, about 45,000 compliances and burdens have been reduced, and this has greatly enhanced not only ease of business but also ease of living in India, which is reflected in all the all the indexes and tables that we see. Amidst this COVID pandemic and crumbling global economies, if I may say so, India has outshined and outsmarted our colonial rulers, British, to become the 5th biggest economy. Today we are the fastest growing economy of the world by far. Abhinav ji is here. I was just mentioning about you. And even in such adverse scenario, we have not only we have taken care of our citizens with commitment, in fact internationally also in whatever manner that we could contribute, whether it was through Vaccine Maitri project or several other projects where we extended a helping hand during crisis times in the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We have been able to do quite a lot and achieve quite a lot, and at the same time, even during that COVID crisis, pandemic times and once in a century crisis, India was still going ahead with major economic reforms such as Atmanirbhar Bharat, etc. So reform is not done in this government by some compulsion. I believe it is by their own conviction. And as Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has stated, that reforms in this government are done by conviction, and the motto is to reform, perform and transform. And I believe this is reflected in the track record of the government for past 9 years or so. Yesterday the Economist said that we'll be able to attain the 5 trillion economy mark rather easily. That's a real change coming through from economists, isn't it? So, and that apart, all the other leading, whether it is IMF has said that India is the lone bright spot in the global economy, so to speak. World Bank says that India is best suited to meet all the global headwinds which are going to come, and as we emerge out of this crisis. The CEO of McKinsey has said that this is going to be India's century, and so all the credible institutions in unanimous voice have said that this is going to be India's decade and century. This has, in my opinion, not happened by some mere act of coincidence. And I believe that the major reason, the major factor for this has been the structural, the transformational, systemic reforms which have been carried out in past decade under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. And what Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has done, in my opinion, is that he has addressed the most fundamental problems of Indian economy, Indian society, which were languishing problems which were languishing and lingering for a long time. Today, every citizen has electricity, gas connection, banking account, clean potable drinking water. You have gas, housing, food. So this has, in fact, unleashed. This has unleashed the potential of each and every Indian, and this has unleashed their aspirations also. And I believe that this has led to an organic systemic growth, which is now being reflected in a multiplier effect in several walks of life, in all fields, whether of economy or of Indian society. This multiplier effect, because the most fundamental problems have been addressed, people have been unshackled, they can unleash their potential. Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji believes in potential of each and every Indian who is standing at the last step of the developmental staircase, so to speak. So this, apart from all the systemic changes which have happened, have led to this multiplier effect coming in, and Indian economy thriving, and we have been the fastest growing economy for past 5-6 years in continuity. Despite COVID pandemic, we have not broken our momentum at all. Now, if I may quickly, just briefly touch upon the reforms which have taken place in past 10 years. You are all aware of that. There have been more than 100 massive welfare schemes. In fact, if anybody takes an account of the most massive welfare schemes which have been ushered in past decade or so globally, you will find that about 100 massive welfare schemes would have been ushered and implemented in India itself. But I'll just briefly come to enactments. The Goods and Services Tax Act 2017 has been implemented. One India, One Tax was pending for a long time. Several governments tried it in the past, they could not find their way through it. The GST has not only simplified the tax regime, reduced the tax burden, but has also led to India becoming a more attractive business proposition. Today, we have all-time high indirect tax revenue collections, and so therefore GST has been a grand success. Similarly, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016 has streamlined the process and the procedure for insolvency and bankruptcy, and therefore that was yet another sore point in our regulatory framework. And I believe that this has also led to several companies finding India attractive destination to invest. This Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, today under this particular Yojana, about 50 crore banking accounts have been opened, and the trinity of JAM, which is Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and Mobile, has led to all the beneficiaries getting the entire, their deserved, whatever remittances were made into their account, they have got the entire proceeds of that. Isn't it, Tejinder Khanna Sahab, long time back we had heard that when 1 rupee travels from Delhi, only 15 paise reaches the beneficiary. So today that is not 100% money or funds or resources have been received, what is remarkable is that in many of these schemes, we have saturation, we have 100% coverage in many of these schemes, and this is something which was never envisaged of earlier. This is a track record which many of the developed countries will also envy. This direct benefit transfer, in fact, has saved more than 2 lakh crore rupees for the public exchequer. Can you just get single labor code, and therefore this is the way ahead. They have been rationalized. Today we do not find problems of labor inspector visiting and making any unreasonable demands on any businesses. Similarly, RERA has also been path-breaking legislation, because there were a lot of issues which were coming through with respect to incomplete projects, etc. They were a liability on the banking system, as well as troubling our individual investors. And after the RERA has come in, we have seen large number of such projects which were not seeing the light of the day. They have also been finished and completed. A word of note on this, that NCLT and NCLAT also, after they have come into inception, they have sorted out several such issues which were languishing for quite some time. Project link investment schemes, Ambassador Anil was just mentioning. 2.5 trillion allocation as incentives of more than 2.5 trillion have been announced under PLI scheme, and under this scheme's products worth about 4 lakh crores have been produced in different sectors so far. Hundreds of crores of rupees have been invested, so this is yet another scheme which has found immense success and receptivity in our business community. My esteemed co-panelists will elaborate on that further. Similarly, national infrastructure pipeline. Now, huge infrastructure projects running into lakhs of crores, they were stuck for years and years together, mostly because of litigation and several other maybe land acquisition issues, etc. Now, in all these infrastructure projects, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has in fact reviewed himself and ensured that most of these projects have been cleared, whether it was having a meeting with DM or SDM and or to the lowest unit of Indian administration, whatever issues which were existing on ground and how to address those realistic issues, that has all been done, and I believe about 90% of such projects which were held up earlier, they have all been cleared. Similarly, whether it is Ujjwala Yojana, under which 25 crore families have been given gas connections. In the first 60 years of our independence, about 14 crore families were given gas connections. But in past decade, more than 25 crore families have been given gas connections. Similarly, Uday scheme, where DISCOMs are being encouraged to be more competitive and provide 24/7 power. Some of the welfare schemes such as Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana were our mainstays during the COVID pandemic, where resources were allocated to those at the last strata of our development picture, and they have greatly benefited from this. Now, under PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, by February 22, about 12 crore farmers have already benefited, and about 2 lakh crore allocations were received by the beneficiaries. Similarly, in Garib Kalyan Yojana, all through the COVID pandemic and even now, I believe, the free ration and food is already being delivered, and they are huge beneficiaries. I do not wish to go into the exact details and numbers. Similarly, foreign direct investments have opened up in several strategic sectors, whether it is defense or mining, even space. In fact, green hydrogen mission provides opportunities of about 10 trillion rupees itself. So the speed and scale of reforms has been enormous, and there are more than, as I mentioned to you, there are more than 100 such massive welfare schemes which have been ushered by this government in past era. And since I was also told to mention a little about the road ahead, because reforms is a continuous process. Although I do not know what specific reforms may be there in the mind of government, but as a student of law and as somebody who keenly follows this subject, some of the reforms which can be envisaged, or keeping the track record of government in mind, we can assess that this may be there in the making now. Cases have been clogging. We all know about judicial delays and all. There may be a system when every criminal case or every civil proceeding can conclude within a specific period of time. Maybe say within an year, an outer limit can come through. Necessary amendments could be made to CRPC and CPC both. Similarly, the appeals emanating from these criminal trials and revisions, etc., can be concluded expeditiously within 3 months of time. As I mentioned to you, the vast web of compliances which are there, they have already been greatly reduced, but there is, I believe there is a dedicated group now which is looking into this, and constantly there is endeavor, there is effort on part of the government to abolish the redundant laws, the obsolete laws, and laws which have outlived their utility. This has not only something which has got to do with business, but it has also enhanced the, as you say, the quality of life of people of this country. Similarly, entire commercial litigation, we can ensure that it finishes within a stipulated period of time, say within 6 months. And there have been certain reports that if judicial delays and legal reforms are of this nature take place, then this will enhance our GDP by at least 2%. So this is not something which is incremental. We can have substantial gains emanating out of this. Similarly, one problem which we have been facing is that here contracts are not strictly enforced. So there can be a statutory mandate that contracts have to be strictly enforced, and they have to be strictly interpreted also. Some of the issues which have been nagging us, like speeding of land acquisitions and easing of registration of property, etc. The government worked on these subjects in a very focused manner, and this was one of the reasons, because they were the critical parameters also. I believe I am running out of my time, Abhinavji, in assessing the ease of business, and therefore this was something which was addressed by the present government. And the way our ease of business rankings have improved is because all these areas where we needed to work, this government has specially focused and addressed this. Whether it is having specialist judges to decide commercial cases, or performance review of judges, which is presently not structured, systemized and organized. In fact, unshackling of the legal profession itself. Today there are large number of embargoes on lawyers like me. So I'm maybe speaking in my own interest, but that is also an area which can be addressed, because lawyers are not entitled to, in Western countries, as my friends would agree, there is a seamless transition from law practice to some entrepreneurial venture to academics. So that is something which is not as seamless in India. Maybe some contingency fee or something that can also be considered, so that this encourages the legal community also to ensure that all the cases are decided expeditiously. And so therefore I am not dwelling into more details. I have already been alerted by Ambassador Anil Trigunayat that my allocated time is over. So all that I would say is that the remarkable transformational reforms which have taken place in past 10 years has set India on path of becoming the third biggest economy of the world, a 25 trillion economy and a developed economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanji, for that very comprehensive reiterating of all the reforms that have taken place in such a short time. And one of the crux is that apart from the various reforms that used to come, and there is a lot to do. Because when we say that we are 53rd or 63rd in the DBI rankings, I look at it that we still have 52 people above us, countries above us. And we need to beat them down, and to reach there, then only you can get the kind of competitive attractiveness that we are looking for. Of course, Prime Minister Modi's started off something that red carpet and not red tape. That is something that has really been improved, the digitalization that is taking place. And you mentioned about the expeditious conclusion of the cases, because our legal system, which you yourself directly referred to, is requires a lot to be done across the country, not only in the commercial cases, but there is much more that needs to be done to do that. We have to become a part of the global value supply chains. That is something extremely important. Yes. And you rightly mentioned about the 1,500 obsolete laws that we have been carrying and that have been defeating the very purpose. It was impossible to do business, frankly. Many of my friends used to say that, when I go to China, I can just get things done. I started manufacturing.
50,000
compliances, yes, have been done everywhere. So that's a remarkable achievement, actually. To get this thing done is something. So we'll, maybe perhaps there might be a question on this. But I will now like to request Mr. Chakrabarty to talk. He has been with the Tatas and all. So I think that how do you look at the current dispensation and how do we move forward? Basic idea is to get there.
Thank you very much. I firstly must commend Abhinav to bring dialogue out of Delhi, and I compliment the Ministry of External Affairs to participate in this initiative. We who stay in Delhi kind of get into the rut because it means that everything has to be only spoken in Delhi. I commend you for breaking that very, what should I say, appropriately timed breath of fresh air and bringing it to Udaipur and taking it to other parts of the country. It's very important to have inputs, not just necessarily from sitting in Delhi, is I think what you're trying to break the stereotype. And I commend you for that. Excellently organized, not just the people who are sitting in the audience, but you have a whole lot of online people listening into the seminar from different parts of the world as well, as I can see. So from the economy perspective, I think the journey for India has been to consistently bring order to the chaos. Because of the 1.4 billion people, by the time you actually set up a new metro route, the first day, the first train ride is already full up. That's the challenge and the problem that we are coping with as a country. It's not about, sparse, lots of land to human ratio in abandoned luxury is not what we enjoy in India. We have over 50% of the population which is actually going to be moving to urban cities by 2030, and we don't have a single greenfield city planned. Just to give you the scale of the complexity and the challenge that is being faced by, let's say, city planners, for example. How do you cope up with this kind of influx? How do you create de-slumification of the cities that we have around the country? How do we deal with the problem of daily traffic, where we are spending more time on traffic than we are actually spending on working? There are cities like Bombay where, a home to office commute and back can consume more than 5 hours of your day, which could effectively have been put into real productive work. So these are the complexities and the challenges. How do we cope up with the totally unplanned rapid urbanization, where basic fundamental underlying infrastructures like sewage or effluence has not been taken into account? We have the Honorable Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, and I'm really inspired by his work phase that when he was the Lieutenant Governor. he had to deal with these kinds of challenges, unplanned, rapid urbanization. Every single city of our country has a ravaged river. We have to clean up all the rivers. There is black affluence flowing through the rivers. So the government is prioritizing and focusing on some of these fundamentals. For example, through the rural work program, there is some kind of sustenance that is being provided to the rural folks who are still there, out there in the villages. The national infrastructure pipeline of over a 1 lakh crore outlay is taking into account the migrant worker who is actually coming to the cities to work, and they are building infrastructure. Today, some of the most complex and sophisticated super expressways are being built as we speak at the rate of maybe 35 kilometers a day in India. And the distance, physical time that it takes to fly between two cities is compressing dramatically. For example, yesterday only I learned about a Varanasi to Calcutta, which today takes 14 hours, is planned to be compressed to a 6-hour journey through the super expressway that is being constructed. So the next generation of India is going to be experiencing some of these fruits of dramatic infrastructural transformation as it is happening all over the place. But we still have to deal with some of the challenges that we have, and I just listed a few of them. Rapid urbanization. How do you deal with migrant labor? What happened to us during the pandemic? We couldn't offer places to stay for the migrant labor, and they had to walk long distances to go back to their villages. We are resolved not to have that happen again. So prefabricated housing, low-cost housing is a big initiative of the government in the urban areas, as well as a Housing for All initiative, which is pan-India, which is spreading all over the country to ensure that there is a guaranteed house for all as an initiative and an outlay being committed to that. Health, we saw the kind of health infrastructure crumble when the pressure came during the pandemic. Basic necessities like oxygen were a thing of a big struggle. So the whole hospital infrastructure, the whole concept of remote telemedication, having the doctors in the cities, look after through technology, use of technology, access to villagers to such specialized medical treatment, all on the connectivity. The whole fiber optic Bharat broadband initiative, which is connecting every single village to a dark, thick fiber to ensure high-speed internet, which will become a bare necessity for people. Otherwise we are going to have a digitally privileged and a digitally disprivileged divide in the society, which we don't want. So there's a big program going on connecting every single village through very thick fiber optic. So it's work in progress. If you look at our land registration offices, there is chaos. So digital land registration is going to bring order to the chaos. If you see our courts, as Amanji said, 5 crore cases are in pendency. There is the big initiative of e-courts, which can help a judge bunch up a whole lot of cases and deal with it in one stroke on a digital system. All of this is work in progress. So I think it is extremely important to focus on these big initiatives that are being taken, because in India, as we are big, only big things will demonstrate the change. We are a land now beyond the pilots. There was a phase in our lives where everybody in the bureaucracy wanted to, oh, it's a great idea, let's do a pilot. We are beyond that phase now as a country. We have to be doing things on a scale that befits the kind of demand that we have as a country. And those are the kinds of initiatives being taken in every single sector. 450 Vande Bharat train sets. We are at 600 aircraft today as a country. We are going to go to 1200 aircrafts which are going to land and be in our airports. 100 airports being re-energized from the Second World War era, where we are going to create a hub and spoke feeder airline network across the length and breadth of the country. So these are all parallel initiatives which are happening. And I am absolutely confident that if we keep this momentum and trajectory, this economy is going to be not only satisfying the 1.4 billion demand, but also become for the Ministry of External Affairs. In fact, I wrote a paper some time ago called Digital Diplomacy. This is our opportunity to showcase and share our experience of being there, done that, of all that we are doing to bring reform in our own country and take it to 25 other friendly countries in the Atmanirbhar Amritkaal that we have for the next 25 years. That's the opportunity, I think, for us. You know, China can build dams and they can build roads, but we can provide the intellectual, digital technology capability to share the best practices that we have built for our own countrymen, to share it with friendly countries around the world. I think that's the opportunity for India. So I'll not take long because Amanji has rattled out a whole series of statistics about all that is going on. But I'm pretty optimistic and bullish that with this kind of momentum, we are going to be an example for the South, and we can provide and share with others, the expertise that we have within the country to be also making the lives of others around the world a better place to live in. Thank you for your attention.
For highlighting some of the major challenges and the whole magnitude of those challenges given the kind of population that we have. Of course, you put it about the urban housing and the challenges that are there. Very often I live in Gurgaon and I often feel that a lot of buildings have been constructed without sewage, without water, without electricity being provided, and it can easily be fixed. Don't give license unless these things are there or not, or the roads are there for the area. It is much easier, and I hope
Next time we complain to RERA see some action.
RERA. Anyways, but you also mentioned about the roads. I think that is something remarkable. No other country can boast of that kind of road making. Now, recently, under the PM Gati Shakti plan, they are talking about 25,000 kilometers of routes. The way the highways have been built, one is surprised that in less than 10 years' time, we have done amazing. So we can achieve.
Our interest spending is twice that of Europe and US.
Must be. They are crippling countries, they are crippling economies. So we need not compete with them. We have to ace them. So that's precisely what it is. Now I'd like to invite a very old friend of mine, not old in age, but Swaminathan, who's a fintech guy, and also heads many of the CII groups and committees, to give us some ideas exactly how we can go into that sector and other sectors. Thank you.
Somebody said to me, it will be 3.5%. So the 1.5% will come down because the fees to the lawyers will come down because they'll have less work to do.
Less work to do.
Absolutely. Most Indians will appreciate this, but for the benefit of the foreigners, you can't have nectar without poison. So there will be poison. What Amanji said may have sounded like a pre-election speech. May have. What Tanmoy said might have sounded like somebody looking for a post-retirement sinecure. But I want you to know that there are specific things that are actually happening that can give you the confidence that something good is happening. And I want to focus on that. I want to be very, very specific here. So no hyperbole. I went to a university called Yale University many years ago, and I discovered that Yale was actually set up with money plundered from India. The man looted India, sent a shipload of muslin and books to the university, and that's how the university was set up. It's a fascinating side story that I'll come to separately. I'll share with you whoever who wants to know. But the point is, it got me thinking, how can a country that was so prosperous, to set up a university so magnificent, be reduced to such penury? I'm 61. I grew up in a country where I was told we are a poor country. And we were poor. I grew up in a country where we were told the population was huge. Today the same population is a blessing. How the world has actually changed. So what has changed to give us the confidence that the land of penury is now the land of opportunity? What has actually changed? And this is not an election speech. I had the good fortune in 1987 to work on cricket. The Indian team used to get paid 4,000 rupees a match. 87. Look at where we are today. So what I want to convey to you is the art of the possible. So there are specific things that have actually happened today, policy initiatives that have actually happened, which should give you the confidence that things are happening. And I want to focus on that. It all starts with self-belief. It all starts only with belief. In 87, the country laughed at us when we said India will become a cricket superpower. Look at it today. Every kid wants to play cricket. Every family has kids who want to play cricket. We dominate the world cricket economy. And I think there are lessons to be learned from the domination that we achieved in cricket to other areas. We did something similar in badminton because of some political issues that actually went down the drain. But that's a different story altogether. So what has happened that gives me the confidence? Two things. You know, I run a company. I'm an entrepreneur. And I can tell you one thing. Short-term forecasting, people always overestimate. Long-term forecasting, people always underestimate. So when you look at Amritkaal, when you look at a 25-year period, most of us don't even know the dimensional changes that are possible in 25 years. Even a small percentage of growth through compounding can turn out to be much, 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 much bigger. If you invest in stock markets, you know what I mean. So I think the power of compounding is what will take this company forward, take this country forward. So when people talk to you about short-term forecasting, you'll actually find invariably they overestimate. You know, we're all guilty of it. You want to raise capital. There's an investor sitting there, and the investor literally has a 5-year horizon. Therefore, I go and tell him what's going to happen in 5 years. I'm usually wrong. I usually overestimate. But when I take a 15-year horizon, actually find I'm again wrong. I underestimate. So when you look at a situation where the conditions of growth have been put in place, what do I mean by that? Is there anybody from the media here? Any media people? Okay. So please don't write what I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to say something very interesting. But don't write this. Yesterday, 2 companies in Udaipur shut down. How do I know? From the GST returns. The digital framework this country has put in place allows evidence-based policy making of a kind that was never possible before. I'll tell you what I mean by that. So these 2 companies that shut down yesterday, they didn't shut down. They surrendered the GST registrations. So there are 3 reasons why companies surrender GST numbers. 1, because they consolidate. So I have 1 registration in Jaisalmer and 1 in Udaipur. I surrender 1, I keep 1. That's 1 reason. That's a good reason. The second reason, I'm not in compliance, I'm suspended. The third reason, my business has come down. And therefore I surrender. So these 2 companies in Udaipur, whose names I have, whose addresses I have, and this public information, have surrendered the GST numbers, the GST registration, because the business has come down. So what does it mean? It means that as government, they can direct business to them if they want to. If they direct business to them by basically saying, these things we are actually currently buying from Madhya Pradesh, why don't you make it here because you make the same thing? Because we know what they are making, we know what the capacity is, we know who they are making it for. The government today is in a position to offer evidence-based support to businesses like never before. It's never happened in the East of India. If you know what to make, and if you know who to sell it to, your work is done. The purpose of business is to produce something and sell to somebody. That data is today available. And what all is it being used for? Let me give you 2-3 examples. Companies like, I'm going to take names of companies, it's not a commercial for the companies. Companies like Maharana are actually lending about 8,000 crores a month to MSMEs. The whole credit infrastructure in this country is being overhauled with private sector support because of the digital infrastructure put in place by the government. Going forward, the government's not going to create jobs, the private sector is. And the enabling environment for private sector through digital infrastructure is going to lead to a many-fold literally explosion in the economy of this country. And that will happen in a very efficient manner, without the leakages that used to happen earlier. So the credit growth that's currently happening, you know, almost 95% of MSMEs today in this country are underprovided for when it comes to loans. If I know that this company sold so much over the last month, if I know who they sold it to, if I have a trend of the data for the last 12 months, I'm happy to lend money to that company by keeping a margin of say 40%. Just the growth in credit will have a huge impact on the economy. And that's possible because of digital infrastructure. Let me give you a second example. We recently just saw the story of those children who died in Gambia because of cough syrup going from India. Lousy cough syrup. They can be caught. While on the one side, I think it's very welcome that they have dismantled the lousy part of the regulatory infrastructure, the setting of the digital infrastructure actually allows better quality regulation. I'll tell you how. What is a spurious drug? Two possibilities. One, the drug is expired. So the batch that you've sent has expired. Therefore, it's a spurious drug. Two, you use the wrong material. In the GST framework, you're required to create something called an e-invoice. Every company with a turnover more than 5 crores, 10 crores currently, and that number is being dropped to 1 crore in the next foreseeable future, companies have to generate an e-invoice for everything they ship out. So if I'm making a batch of ties and my total turnover for the year is more than 10 crores, I need to generate an e-invoice for the ties I ship out. I also have an e-invoice coming into me for the goods that I actually buy. By matching the e-invoices against the batches, you know what it is, spurious. The quality of supervision, the quality of regulatory oversight, effective regulatory oversight, and flagging by exception the erroneous ones. Not every businessman is dishonest, and not everybody is deliberately dishonest. There are matters of oversight. And I think the government can use its judgment to figure out who to charge for deliberate culpable activities and who to basically let go. The quality of data that's actually flowing in on account of digitization in India is what is transforming India. Believe you me. There are 18 publicly available databases today. 18 publicly available databases that allows you to enforce the will of the government. And I don't mean the will of the government in a very big brother kind of a world. I'm basically saying, if there's a traffic light, please follow the traffic light. That's all there is to it. And I think the consequences of this on the country as a whole is going to be huge. So when you think digital, don't think of this Paytm. When you think of digital, don't just think of payment systems. They're extremely important. What's also important is when K.V. Kamath actually says that today the Indian banking system has never been stronger. It's because when an NPA happens, RBI gets to know within minutes of it. Because the reporting system. There will always be business cycles where companies will go down and therefore NPAs will happen. That's different from people who are frauds. The ability to discern and separate the frauds from the ones that are kosher is what's available to the government today. But it's not all, it's all not all hunky-dory. I want to mention two things here, which I think are very important. When you start dealing with the world at large, when you want to be a Vishwaguru, you can't be a Vishwaguru either. You can't afford to be a Vishwaguru. You can't go around dictating terms to countries in manners that are not acceptable to them. So what does it mean by that? You will also be taken advantage by countries. So let me give you two examples here. A month and a half ago, the Commerce Minister talked about gave two examples. Kia Motors and Hyundai. The news is there everywhere. They took advantage of our FTA agreements to import indiscriminately, sending the Indian BOP into a tizzy. How do you prevent it? How do you create situations where you protect your own interests? That's very important. The second thing, I think Deepak Bagla, who's a friend of mine, is a great communicator. But I've also read that the whole situation there in the ministry where there was an overstatement of the benefits from the work that he actually did. How do you deal with it? I think as a country, we need to figure out how to deal with it. And I mentioned in the context of the UK, for example. We need to learn how to work with countries who work against our interests. There was one foreign service officer who was on television yesterday who basically said, you must shut down the Rolls-Royce factory that's going to come up in India. That's not the way to do it. We must ask the 10 companies who are trying to invest in the UK not to invest in the UK. So we should know what policies hurt and what policies hurt us. That understanding of self-interest is currently lacking, because ultimately the government and the private sector, and the private sector will be the driver of growth, not the government. The private sector's driver of growth needs to be able to tell the government what is in the country's interest. And I think if you shed the suspicion between government and the private sector, I think we have an extraordinary future ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swaminathan, for an exceptionally good at calling a spade. That's really good. We have tremendous opportunities, as you mentioned, but we need to take the right kind of decisions. That's also extremely important. And you mentioned about the power of compounding. That's indeed should be the mantra. How we can go ahead. Now we'll just take very quickly, we are already out of time, so one or two questions, if there are any, would like your question to be addressed. One person, please. A young man. Mike, did you
Can you mind
Louder.
So I just wanted your views with regards to like how do you view India's negotiation with the EU on the bilateral treaty and investment agreement, which has been going on since 2007, where in addition to traditional divisions with regards to sanitary and phytosanitary measures, the issue has been, the negotiations have been stalled mainly due to the bilateral model investment treaty of 2016, wherein it doesn't seem to include the long-standing demands of EU in terms of including fair and equitable treatment provisions, where they largely feel that our model bilateral investment treaty doesn't involve protective mechanisms for the foreign investors, especially with regards to repatriation of profits and all, and also given our poor record in terms of enforcing the contracts. So how do you see, like, what are you like hopeful with regards to its quick conclusion, and could its potential conclusion reduce our Chinese dependence on Chinese imports in terms of intermediary goods?
right? Now earlier, because most of the treaties, FTAs that we had signed, they were mainly on the basis of the products and not the services. So therefore, this is our strength on the services side, which brings in the question of mobility of the professionals. Whereas there is a problem with the Western countries, especially the European Union, on certain issues of the market access. Then they keep on increasing the kind of trade barriers, technical barriers to trade you talked about. So those are the kind of issues, or environment, or labor, or social standards. Now these are beyond the purview of the trade, but that's what most of the Western countries, we use it as protectionist measures. And so we have to compound. Secondly, I don't believe that we should conclude any treaty in a haste until and unless our own interests are taken care of. The foreign minister a few days ago and also the commerce minister spoke about that we would like the India-EU FTA and India-UK FTA also to be concluded at the earliest. There are various technical functions and the names and the blockings and all which I will not mention for you, but at the same time, if you are following it, the idea is to have an equitable, because earlier FTAs have not paid off the dividends. You remember our FTA with ASEAN, it worked negatively for us, so that's why we renegotiated. The investment agreement that you mentioned about, that investment agreement has been updated, because realities keep on changing. Now it was done in 2016, so we try to renegotiate our treaties with most of the countries. First, investment treaties, double taxation avoidance agreements. So it's a very complex issue, and EU itself is a huge bureaucracy. One of the biggest bureaucracies in the world you have to deal with is in the EU. And so they want their own interests, their own market access, they want to ensure. On the other hand, India also wants to ensure this. Thank you. So I think we'll, with that, Captain Balsa.
Just a small question. ILFS went into bankruptcy because of that, probably. One could be an excuse for that. Now, how does this impinge? Because this sort of a judicial overreach, where agreements, because if courts start unilaterally abrogating such sort of agreements, then how do foreign direct investment come?
As a resident of Noida, I can tell you, Captain Bansal, that the ILFS joint venture had recovered their revenues well within the number of years compressed, because as I mentioned, the moment you open a road, you have more cars on the road than the capacity of the road itself. So in this case, I know distinctly that the joint venture had a projected revenue realization across a period of time which they had already realized much before that period of time. So therefore, it would have ended up becoming hugely profitable, unfairly profitable for the venture if they kept on collecting toll. And that is why the toll got stopped and the court intervened. That is my, what I absorbed from the public domain, but Amanji may know better.
The major point that Anupji was making was a substantial one. It's a suggestion for consideration of our honorable courts, because Government of India, and whenever we also appear, the policy making squarely lies within the domain of the executive and legislature. We try to impress upon the courts also, we try to persuade them. Finally, it is for them to adjudicate. It is for all three institutions of, or all three pillars of our democracy and our constitution to be conscious and mindful of the fact that where our Lakshman Rekha is. And we'll keep making efforts, but I'm sure your suggestion is being heard by those sitting and presiding in the courts. I'm not going into details of ILFS and the individual cases, but that's a good suggestion for consideration.
Thank you so much. And Captain Bansal, the larger question is that arbitrary cancellation of contracts by the government, changing of the policies retroactively, is injurious to the health of the economy and investments. That's a bottom line. And it should be avoided to the extent possible. And so with these words, I think we can thank the esteemed panelists who have done a tremendous job of talking about India's economy in the next 25 years. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I focused on my subject, which was legal and economic reforms, and I have not mentioned any party or anything to do with election. I do not know election is in somebody's mind. He may feel anything, I can't. But if you really want to contest an election and have a speech against me, you are most welcome by all means. Thank you.